Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, we're doing something totally different. As many of you know, if you've listened to the podcast in the past, I offer something called Cabin Consultations or mentor calls. They're like a 1-hour call where we dig deep specifically into your cabin. We've done these with people who haven't bought land yet, people who've bought land and are starting the build, people who already have a cabin up and running and just want to work on a couple things. It's all over the board. So on Instagram, a couple weeks ago, I offered to do a free cabin consultation to anyone who was willing to do it on the podcast. We cover a lot of the same things in a lot of them. Obviously, we go specific on your individual cabin when we're on a one-on-one call, but I figured that doing one of these would actually have a lot of valuable information in it for our listeners. So if that's something that sounds helpful to you, then this podcast was made just for you. As always, thanks for joining us. Let's do it. Hi there.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Are you at the cabin?
No, this is my house. I live just right down the street from the cabin, like not even a mile.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah, I wanted to be at the cabin for this, but I have guests, so that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. And then honestly, your home looks like a cabin. Your backdrop is like beautiful.
Thank you. I know. And like I got everything situated, and then the sun, I tried to find a spot, so I'm just going to have to try to not blind you.
No, I think it's beautiful. I mean, you're doing a good job of blocking it, but when you like move and it peeks out, it's just like a really nice little sun flare.
Yeah, it's like glowing.
Yeah. I am so excited to do this. This is our first ever cabin consultation live for the podcast, which we've never done before. But I've done plenty of cabin consultations and they're always really fun. So I think this is going to be great.
I am very excited.
Okay, so I've done some sleuthing on your cabin, usually before, sleuthing is maybe the wrong word, research. Usually before a cabin consultation, I get a little bit of info. You sent me some, and then I do a little bit of digging just so that I go into it with a deeper understanding of your market, your cabin, where you're at now. I like to read reviews. I like to do all of those things. But for the sake of the podcast, I kind of want other people to know some of the things that I found out. So why don't you start by just giving us an overview of your cabin, how long you've been hosting, all the details that will help us kind of go from here.
Sure. So I'm a brand new host. We live in Montana. We're up in the mountains just outside of Helena, about 20 miles. And I love living here. It's so peaceful. I just love everything about being up in the mountains. And so I've just had this idea, this dream for a while now about building a place where people can experience my everyday and build memories. I love hosting, but it's just, trying to find the right opportunity that would work in my lifestyle and where I live. Yep. There was a piece of property adjacent to our home. I would walk up there every day. In the afternoons, I just would take walks up this road, and I would always think, man, this would be such a perfect place to build a little spot for people to come. But the land around here is really hard to buy. It gets snatched up super quick. It's not cheap. So I just kind of, thought, well, that would be nice. And then in the fall of 2020, that piece of property unexpectedly came onto the market. And so I, at that point, shared with my husband this dream I had. And he thought, yeah, let's do it. I think it'll work. I think it's great. So we scrambled, put an offer in on the very same day for that piece of land, and we did not get it. That was when all the buyers were coming in with all the cash offers from California. And so that just got snatched up for way over asking price. And that was that. So I was bummed, but we gave it a go. And then the next fall, October of 2021, it came back on the market again. Same thing. Totally unexpectedly. I was driving up my driveway and I saw the realtor staking in the sign. And I'm like, oh, this is my chance. So we put in
This is
another
so interesting. Do
offer.
you know why they sold so quickly after buying?
Well, I did find out all the details later, like later, and it was somebody from California. They came in, bought the property. They wanted to build a home there, but it was their second choice. There was a piece of land
Oh,
on the other side of the Helena Valley that they really wanted, but for some reason it fell through. And so that was kind of their consolation purchase. And then
your dreamland, though.
yes, yeah. And so whatever was going on with that other piece of property, I think it was like a tax lien or something like that. That resolved. They bought that piece of land and then put this one back up for sale.
Okay.
So it came for sale the second time. We again rushed, put an offer in the very same day. Over like we're like, okay, we'll put in an offer for more than asking price. And we did not get it a second time.
Again.
Again. And so that was in the fall of 2021. And in May of 2022, my husband rode his four-wheeler up the road and happened to run into the gentleman who had bought the property. He said, "Hey, if you ever decide to sell this property,
Mm,
we would love to buy it from you. Please let us know." And it was a couple months later, I think it was in July, out of the blue, they called us and said, we've just been thinking about it a lot and we really feel like this land is supposed to be yours. Do you still want to buy it?
mm.
I know, it was awesome. I was so excited, so grateful. And they just sold it to us direct. They sold it to us for exactly what they bought it for. They did. I mean, they were just so great. So we purchased the property in August of 2022 and
Okay.
started our build in October of 2022 and then wrapped it up just this last October. So one
Okay.
year later.
Okay.
And so I put it on the market or on Airbnb November 12th.
Okay.
So brand new host. We had back-to-back guests over Thanksgiving week, and now we're in the thick of a run of guests through early January. So that's
Okay.
exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, just
Okay.
super new.
Yeah, which is great. Can you talk me through a little bit of the business model planning you did, like as you were thinking about buying the land or when you were building? Also, it's totally fine if you don't have an answer to that. My first cabin, I was just like, I want to own a cabin in Boone and I'm going to figure out how to make this work. But I'm just curious, like, what kind of business model you had in mind? Was it just to cover the expenses? Did you have goals? What did that look like?
Yeah, so there was a lot of, I just want to build a cabin and do this thing. But then you do have to have the practical side of it to,
Yeah.
sit down and be like, is this going to work?
Yeah.
Because it's a big investment and it's a big risk um, to put all that out there. But, it's such a beautiful place and it's so unique. I just knew it would be successful. So we did, crunch out the numbers, like what is it going to take for us to be able to just break even, right?
Yep.
And so, I have occupancy goals I'd like to hit and of course break even. And I feel like that's really doable. If I can turn a profit, that'll be awesome.
Yep.
But I know that takes time. I know it takes time to build a business, but really for me, I would like to continue to develop this property. I just have all these ideas of how I want to make it just this magical place for people to come. And eventually I would like to be able to retire myself out of my full-time job and
Okay.
just exclusively host. We've
Okay.
talked about, building another structure on the property, but I need a little bit of recuperation after our first build. That was
For
a
sure.
lot.
Okay. That's really helpful. So if one of your goals, because this is interesting, right? Like a lot of us, we'll buy it in a place where we want a home, and then breaking even is just like you're paying for my vacation home, which is great. That's like one model, right? But in your case, it's right next to your house. So this isn't a cabin that you're using as an escape. It's not a cabin that you even might retire in because you have a house right there. This is definitely more of a business for you, especially if you want to be able to leave your job and make money. So those financial models will matter a little bit more. Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
would be the most helpful place? I have like a structure that I can follow with people who are at the very beginning, but you're not at the very beginning. And so I'm curious, what would be the most helpful place to start? Where do you feel like you need the most help right now?
I spent the entire year of the build doing my research. I followed every podcaster I mean, I've been following you. I listened to everything. I'm very type A. I'm a planner. I want to know what to do in case of anything happens. And so I really spent this whole year trying to learn everything I could about short-term rentals and hosting and all of the things. But when push comes to shove, a lot of that you can't learn until you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I'm in that like shiny honeymoon phase where it's like,
Mhm.
yay, it's new and everybody loves it and everyone's feedback is great. But I'm also realistic in knowing that challenges are going to come. And so wanting to like better prepare myself for how to handle those. And also, there's some logistical things that I know I need to do, or maybe I don't. I don't know. And I just am not quite sure where to start. Things like building an email list. Is that something that I need to be investing my time in? And I don't even know where to start
Yeah.
in how to do that.
Okay.
I think about like I look at my bookings so far and I'm knocking it out of the park for booking weekends, which is great, but what can I do to start filling up my weekday bookings?
Yeah.
Do I need to be on VRBO? Do I need to be on other OTAs, so that I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket with Airbnb? How do I like continue to grow my social media and actually find the people that are going to be booking a stay? So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about right now and just looking for some direction from somebody
Yep.
experienced.
Yeah, that's super helpful. So I'm hearing two big buckets of areas that I think we should talk about. One of them is like the logistical side of running an Airbnb. And as you're doing it longer and perhaps add one or two more, what are some systems you can set up that's going to make your life easier so that if and when something does go wrong, you know exactly what to do with it. And then on the other side, I hear marketing, like, which
Yeah.
is, I think, so common. How do I fill those days? Do I build an email list? Where do I market? Which of those do you want to start with? We can start with either of them.
Um, I don't have a preference.
Okay.
Which
Then
direction
let's
do you
start
want to go?
with the logistical ones, which are the like less sexy parts of cabin ownership and short-term rental, but something that I'm personally obsessed with just because as I added cabins, like when I had just one, it was less necessary. As I added them, it became more and more crucial that I had a system for organizing everything. And I feel like since that feels like your long-term plan, setting up systems now that will work for you right now, but will also serve you well as it grows, I think could be really helpful. So, what does your organization system look like now? Do you have one for managing like which guests are coming? Do you use a certain app or tool, or like how are you managing all of the pieces right now?
Right now, I'm just using Airbnb. That's it. I'm
Okay.
just looking at my bookings coming in, communicating with my guests through that platform. Um, and, I've set up automatic messages, which is helpful. So I'm not like retyping those
Yes.
things I want to say over and over. So that's been good. And I'm slowly tweaking that as they roll out. I'm like, oh, that sounded kind of weird in that situation. So I'm getting those dialed in. So
Yeah.
I'm doing that, but I'm just
Okay.
managing it all myself.
That's helpful. Okay. So I think automatic messages, although this is somewhat debatable. So the first thing I want to say is that every Airbnb or short-term rental owner hosts in a different way. You have a background in the hospitality industry. So you certainly have some of the instincts that it takes. I'm guessing your
Yes.
instincts are probably pretty good.
Yeah.
I personally am a big favor of automating my messages. All of my messages to guests are not automated, but the ones that will give them information prior to their stay, I think is really helpful for automating so that I don't have to think about it. Like those are the crucial ones, right? That they have all the information they need in order to show up. So the ones that we have, I don't know what you have set up, but we have one that goes out 2 weeks before their stay where we just, well, first of all, there's one right after they book. We do it 5 minutes after they book. That's just like, welcome. We're so excited to have you. And then we link our guest book immediately so that then they have like everything that they would need and that they would, if they're planning, excursions, outings, they want to order food. I want them to have like all of that information ahead of time. So our guest book we made on Canva. We have a PDF in a Dropbox folder and we put that link in that first automated message. And then 2 weeks before their stay. Actually, this is different at each cabin. Cozy Rock people book really far in advance or further in advance. So we do one 2 weeks before their stay. At the other two cabins, it's only 1 week before their stay because we get a fair amount of, a month before, a week before, whatever. And that one's just like, hey, as you're thinking about packing, here are some things. Here's what we provide. It like overviews our amenities so that they know exactly what they'll find. Is there propane in the grill? I've developed that email over time, knowing what questions are most commonly asked. The number one question is coffee. Do we have a coffee maker? And what kind of, is it beans? Is it Keurig? What kind of coffee do we need to bring? So that's in there. Shampoo, conditioner, soap. Is that already in the shower? Is that something they need to bring? Weirdly, bed linens gets asked about and I do know like when we stay in Jersey in the summer, you have to bring your own linens and your own towels. So at some places you do have to provide that. I'm
Interesting.
guessing based on your listing that you provide all of that. It seems like a higher end listing, but it can't hurt to just mention like, hey, this is all going to be provided. Basically, if there's anything that they need to bring, that's where I make it clear this is what you might want to bring with you. And then a day before the stay is when I send the address and the lockbox code. And I do that intentionally. I think most people probably do this, but I just don't want current guests to feel like someone has the address ahead of time, someone has the security info. So I feel like a day before is safe enough that they have it in time to map out their GPS route and whatever. Okay, so you have automated messages. The second place, and this is, and I don't think it has to be this particular tool. I'm not paid by them. It's just my personal favorite. Have you heard of Trello?
I've heard of it. I've heard of all of the softwares, all of the things. I just don't know which
There's a lot
one.
of them.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's like for a new host, it's pretty overwhelming to be like, which one's the best? Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is super helpful. I'm
I'll
taking
tell
notes.
you the ones that I used. I'm going to share my screen for anyone listening. If you go to the YouTube version, you'll be able to see my screen too, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. But
Okay.
I'm going to show you our Trello board just so you can see exactly how we organize this. But basically, this was less important for me when I had one cabin, I will be honest. Though, even with one cabin, I do think it's a really helpful tool.
Yeah, because it is tricky. I there's a lot of people I follow and they're all recommending something different and
I know. I know. And that's why I say, like, you can find your own tool. This one I've been using for 6 years, and I find I really, and I'll be clear, one of the reasons I like it is that I'm a very visual person.
Mhm.
And like, for example, I love Post-its. I use the Post-it app on my computer all the time. I
Me
like,
too. I
yeah.
love that.
Okay, then you might really like Trello because Trello basically functions as like lists with Post-its. They're called cards. And
Okay.
you can like drag them just like you would a Post-it in real life. You can drag them around. Okay, so you can have lots of different boards. So these are like all my boards. I use Trello for everything, but this is my rentals board. So you
Oh,
can see there's like a bunch
nice.
of different lists. Now, again, we have multiple cabins. So let's just focus on Cozy Rock since that's the one we know. And let's imagine that this is just my Cozy Rock board. I have one list that is just like everything that I need to know for like the logistics of that cabin. Now, Cozy Rock I built from scratch, as you did with yours. And
Mhm.
so a lot of this is from the build process, like our title attorney, our house design. As I was doing research, all of them got a card for the different categories. The well install. Let's click on one of these. Let's look at the very sexy well install. You can put lots of different notes on here, and I always put dates on them so that when it came time, if someone were to ask me about our well now, off the top of my head, I would have absolutely no idea how much I paid for it, who I used. I just wouldn't remember. All I have to do is go to Trello, open up my well install board, and I can see exactly who I talked to, how much it cost for our well, exactly what I can attach documents. So I attached our pricing document to it. Like it shows exactly what all that pricing looked like. So I have all of that there. Okay, this is for the build. It kept me, if anyone is thinking about building, I highly recommend Trello because as you know, having been through a build, there's so many choices to make, like siding, for example. Here's one. Okay, this one, it looks like I didn't do too much research. Interesting. Okay. Appliances, all of the things that I was having to look at. Recently, we had to switch hot tub cleaners, so hot tub maintenance. Every time I was like looking up all the different places that I could call. And then when I got a call back, I put all those notes in here. So if inevitably my hot tub cleaner will probably leave at some point, I want to remember the research I did 2 years ago. Who did I talk to? Who was the cheapest one? Who was most expensive? I can immediately just reference this. You can also add labels.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing. I wish I knew about this during my build because I have a folder that's like this thick with papers and receipts and my notes, and because it's like your brain dump, right? Like if it's in your brain, you're putting it here in an organized way. Love it.
That's right. You have to have somewhere to put all of it. And then once you start hosting, there's all these other things that you have to think about, right? So like camp, I share with my sister. So the other thing is this is really nice for collaboration. Both Sean, my husband, and my sister have access to this whole board so that they can add things in here too. When we were researching new cleaners, I stored them all in here, but my sister could go in here and write a comment too if she was doing additional research. So if our cleaner, for example, just this morning, my cleaner messaged and said, we're going on vacation this week in January. But don't worry, I have backup cleaners. So I can just pull up this card and look at who are my backup cleaners in order of who I would use. And then I can call them to see about those dates. And it's all right in here. I also put all my to-do lists in here. So for me, I don't live down the street. So I have to plan ahead for trips of what are the things based on guest feedback. What are the things I need to do? This could still be helpful for you if you have back-to-back guests and you can't fix things right away. I'm thinking like less urgent fixes. Obviously, the urgent ones you'll do. We make our to-do list so that when we go up to Cozy Rock next week, now I know exactly what things we need to do while we're up there because they're all on this to-do list right here. So this is where I store like all of that information and all of our to-do lists and all of that for all of our cabins goes into one Trello board.
Did you start this? Like, did you have this tool right at the very beginning, or did you find it somewhere along the way? And so you had to kind of like catch up your information?
No, well, that's interesting. I'd been using Trello for years. I used to run a startup. So when you're out in San Francisco, everyone knows like every newest tool and app or whatever. And someone introduced me to this one and I was obsessed, but I only used it for my video production business and my personal life. It wasn't until, because I only had one cabin. So to your point, like my systems didn't need to be as strong. But the minute I started building Cozy Rock, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to use Trello for this to keep all of that information. And then I went back in and added the Boone cabin. Okay. Prior to that, I'd kept it in a spreadsheet. I also love Excel, which I'll show you for our financial piece. That's the other tool we use. But for this, I really like the visual aspect. I like that as soon as a task is done, I can like move it to a done column. I like that I could assign Sean stuff. So he has a to-do list on there and I will drag things over there. So when we get up to Cozy Rock, theoretically, he doesn't need to ask me what he's working on. He can pull up Trello on his phone and be like, I know exactly what my to-do list is. I'm going to go to Home Depot and get these things so that I can do these projects, right?
Yeah, I love this. I love it.
So that I would recommend getting started just for like any information you get from folks, your clean, like all of that you can just store in one place.
Yeah, okay. That's excellent.
Okay, now I'm going to share the other not sexy, but a helpful tool that I use on a daily basis, which is just Excel. And what I've put together is I have an Excel spreadsheet that I call, it's just a template that I share with folks for my cabin consultation. So I can send this to you afterwards. Okay. These are close to our numbers. They're just based on our averages. So you can see a general idea, but our numbers are constantly changing. And so we just kind of put that in there. Let me see if I can share my screen again.
Yeah, this will be helpful too, because this is a big piece that I it was so busy during the build. And like I said, I was just like, okay, put this receipt here, put this receipt here, put this receipt here. I really have got to sit down and like, I couldn't even tell you like my total costs for, you know, any of it because I haven't sat down and done it. I'm like dreading it. I'm
Totally.
avoiding it. And even, I don't have a good spreadsheet or system yet for just tracking my month to month financials. So this is super helpful.
That's what I'll show you. So I use this for both big picture overview. In the startup world or the business world, we also call it, the second piece is like a runway, which is basically like per month, I can see what I'm bringing in. So then you can predict if we had 0 bookings for 4 months, how much longer could we last as a business, right?
Right.
Which in theory is like, why would I ever worry about that until COVID hit?
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden our county shut down rentals and we couldn't rent for 2 months, but you didn't know how long it was going to go. But I could pull up my runway and see, based on where we are now, based on predicted, what are our expenses, here's how long we can last in this environment. And for taxes, you'll find after the first year, you have to have detailed accounting, especially if you want to write things off. So I obsess about monthly bookkeeping because I do want to write off any expenses we have. Okay, so I'm going to show this to you in 1 second. The one other thing I'll say about receipts, because obviously when you do your taxes, you don't necessarily have to produce all your receipts to your accountant. I guess it depends if you're doing it, if you have an accountant. My accountant does not ask for all my receipts, but if I were ever to get audited, I would need to be able to produce all those receipts. So I would say to anyone running an Airbnb as a business, which is basically everyone, obsessing about your receipts is going to be really important, but it's really tricky. And I am not good at like physical things, organizing them. So anytime I make a purchase for the cabin, as soon as I'm checking out at Home Depot or wherever, the receipt comes out, I set it down, I take a picture with my phone, and then I put it into an album on my phone called Cabin Receipts. So that if that time came where I were audited, the first place I'm going to go is to my phone and the receipt folder, and I have everything. It also works when I'm doing my accounting at the end of the month, which we'll take a look at in just a second.
That's a great tip because I've needed to look at a receipt before and I wasn't at home.
Yeah.
And so having that there on your phone would be really helpful.
Well, in a world where I'm audited too, I just want to be able to share that album with my accountant. Like, I don't want to have to go through all of it. That's what I'm paying them for. And so having it all in one place like that is really helpful. Plus, Sean also makes purchases. It's a shared album on our iPhones. So he can add receipts to that folder too. So if you have multiple people who are managing a rental, that's really helpful. If my cleaner buys anything, right now she texts me the receipts, but honestly, I could just share that photo album with her and she can just add them to the same folder. I could do that with all 3 of our cleaners.
Yeah.
So again, as you're scaling, it becomes more important than it is when it's just one rental. Okay.
Right.
It's called, the spreadsheet's going to be called Cabin Build Financial Template because it does include everything from the build on. You don't need that. You've already done that.
Yeah, but man, that would be so helpful for somebody who's man, if I could go back.
Yeah, because in it there's one page that's like financial projections, and it's not our exact build cost, but it does show, it's very close, and it shows the big categories like general conditions, site work, concrete, and then what we spent on each of those categories. So that might vary. If you do a different foundation, it's going to vary greatly, but it will at least give you an idea of those big categories to have an idea of like how you financially predict a build. Okay. Do you have the spreadsheet?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Let's start at the very, very high level financial overview page. That one is where we have 4 rentals. One of them is a long-term rental, and then the other ones are short-term rentals. But this is very, very high level. This will matter less. You're in your first year, right? So this probably looks like there's a lot of data there. But what this spreadsheet allows me to do is compare year to year. So I can see when you're in year 3, how is this comparing to year 1? What are the economic factors? What are the saturation of the market factors? What are all the things that can help me better understand my rental as a business financially, how it compares to other things? You're not there yet, so let's not spend too much time on that. Then if you click on yearly summary, this is what I look at the end of every year. I have 3 columns for each cabin: total income, total income, total expenses, and then total profit. And then I have that for all of our cabins. So then at the end of the year, I can see how much did I on average profit from all of our cabins. I always look at this and feel like it is kind of crazy how many people can leave their jobs because we have not figured out a financial model yet where we are making enough consistently for us to like not have regular jobs. But I think it's because we just spend too much.
Yeah.
Because we both have full-time jobs, if we need something or a guest gives feedback, we're just like, buy it. We have the money from the profit. Let's just buy it.
Oh man,
And
I just did that too. We had guests that stayed in our A-frame over Thanksgiving, and they loved it, but they just said that they thought that the love seat was not very comfortable. And of course, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, we have to change that. This is, we got to make sure it's comfortable." And so, yeah, I just went and found another love seat.
yes,
And I thought, I can't, like, that's not sustainable. Like, you can't,
yes.
every time a guest is like, well, I prefer this, you can't just run out and change it and have to, because then the guests I just had checked out, that guest had left a note in the guest book. That's how I knew. They talked about how they wished that the love seat was more comfortable. Well, then the very next guest, in their private note to me, in their Airbnb review, they were like, "Hey, we just wanted to let you know we really loved the love seat. And we hope that if you change it out, that you put it somewhere awesome because it's beautiful." So that was a good lesson for me, that I can't like
Yes.
panic at every first piece of feedback and just run out and buy something new.
That sure is the instinct though. I'm
Mhm.
totally guilty of that. I've done that. In fact, we got our first 4-star review the other day and they said the mattress was too firm. First time in 2.5 years anyone has ever complained about that mattress. And I immediately was like, should we get Sleep Number beds? Because you can't please
Yeah.
everyone, but Sleep Number you can. And then the next guest, same thing, said, we love the mattress. Where did you get it? So I think it's a good lesson to learn early on. But the luxury of not doing it full time as a business yet is that in those early years, you really can obsess about, okay, the money we're making, we're putting back into making this the experience that we really want. But
Yeah.
anyway, if your goal is to leave your job, I will note that we have struggled to do that mostly because of our spending, I think, and what our
Right.
expenses
I
are.
could see that being a struggle
Yes.
for me.
Yes. So this is where like at the end of each month I'll calculate and I'm able to see basically like how are we doing? What does our overall like are we at least profitable? Yes, we're profitable on all three accounts. Great. We're doing something right. If your goal is just to cover expenses, then you don't care how profitable you are. That said, for us, we had to build up a savings account. We wanted like a safety net. We have a personal safety net, but we also wanted a rental safety net. So we have spent the last 3 years using all of our profits either put back into the rentals or just sitting there for the safety net. And our goal is that within a year, we will have hit that goal and like stayed there consistently so that then the profit can be money that we are seeing
Right.
as paychecks. Does that change how much we have to work full time? Right. And so this is the page on the spreadsheet that kind of allows you to see that. Now,
Mhm.
this is the part that's probably what you're putting off. And I totally feel you. But now it's really fun for me. I obsess about it at the end of every month. But this is the monthly income and expense sheet. This is
Mhm.
literally line item to bookkeeping. Some
Yeah,
people have accountants who do this for them. I have an accountant for my business who theoretically does this for me, and I still do it myself because I do think there's value in being in the weeds with your rental and knowing where your money is going.
I agree. Yeah. My husband's like, "You need to see how much you're spending."
Yeah.
He's the one that reminds me. He's like, we bought a lot of stuff on the business card. Like, you need to get in there and be looking at what you're spending." He's like, "Because I don't think you realize how much you spent, you
Yep.
know?" So
Yep.
I agree that it's good to be in there and looking at it and hands-on.
Yep. I will say though, I did not go backwards and do this for the build process. I kind of ignore the build process. I have a number in my head of how much we can spend. And then within that, where we spend it, this is just me. But for the monthly, like the month to month business ops, I do obsess about that. So this is
Yeah.
where you go to the monthly income expenses page. At the end of every month, I go to my credit card, which I have a separate credit card for the rental, and my checking account, and I download the last month spreadsheet in the form of like a .csv. And then I copy and paste them all into this master spreadsheet. But it's going to show up as like a bunch of codes. It's not going to show you all the items. So then I go through the entire spreadsheet and I have to assign which property was this for, what category is. Sometimes they'll
Okay.
get categories for you. They're not the categories I want. So I change all the categories. I then put who I paid that to and exactly what the item is. And this is where the receipts come in handy. Sometimes I remember we went to Target and bought Christmas decorations. I'll just put Christmas decorations. Though Target is a tricky one because you can buy like laundry detergent there. You can buy
Right.
you can buy any different. So sometimes I itemize them. And then the total amount. And then I also go to Airbnb. Well, that will show up in my checking account, but I then go to Airbnb to categorize each of the rental income as to which property it went to. You won't need to do
Okay.
that yet. So this is going to
Right.
be much easier for you right now. But what that allows me to do is I then pull from this page into the summary sheet, right? Like these are all
Okay.
formulas typically. So it gives me my big picture look, but it also allows me to get in the weeds where I can then filter by category and see how much I spent on decor in a given month, which is what I'm most often criticized for because I spend a
Yeah.
lot on decor. But you can actually like look at those category numbers to know where you're spending your money. You probably
Yeah.
don't need much more direction than that. You have the spreadsheet. You can delete all my info and then just put in your first month. But this is what I do on the last day of the month, every month for my business, for the rental business, and for our personal income. And I just like literally block off a day to do it. And I
Yeah.
like sit in front of Netflix and just pull the spreadsheets and just do the very boring work of
Yeah.
categorizing everything.
Thank you for sharing that. It's super, it's like, I know I need to do this. I don't want to create a new spreadsheet. That's not my skill set. So having a template to work off is so helpful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
If you have questions when you're doing it, just let me know. But that's the template and it should guide a little bit. Feel free to delete my stuff, but that just gives you, I wanted to put some numbers in there so that you
Yeah.
can see an idea of like how I use this, why this is valuable.
Right.
Um, yeah. And you'll see with our 3 rentals, I also like sharing it because you'll notice everyone thinks Cozy Rock is like either our only rental or that all of our rentals perform like that. And it doesn't. This is a
Yeah.
good lead into marketing, right? I invest all of my marketing time into Cozy Rock. So of course it performs better, right? But
Mhm.
then I think seeing the other 2 where like we profit a little bit, but not a lot. And that's also normal and okay. And will change
Right.
over time based on different trends. So
Hmm.
that's where that is. Okay. You have that spreadsheet. We can close that out. Now let's talk marketing because some of your other questions fit into this.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you guide this with specific questions if you have them, though I heard one about email list. And the
Hmm.
one thing I want to say at the front end is like there's a bunch of different ways you can market a cabin. And so the thing that I always recommend at the very beginning is figure out which one of those are you already good at or do you find joy in? And
Yeah.
start there because doing all of them really well is like nearly impossible if you're not doing this full time. And Airbnb is a great marketing tool. So Airbnb will do a lot of the marketing for you. I don't know if you've like watched commercials or listened to any podcasts recently, but Airbnb ads are everywhere right now, which is
Hmm.
basically our service fees to Airbnb is helping fund all of their big marketing efforts so that people are spending more time on Airbnb. So for me, social media is obviously the one that I was most comfortable with and the one that I found the most joy in. So that's where I started. But I would say if the thought of an email list brings you a lot of joy and you like writing or this feels like something that's exciting, then I think that's a great place to start. I will say an email list is also way lower lift than a lot of the other ones. So it really can't hurt to just start one.
Right.
And there's a couple ways to collect emails that I've used or I've heard about other people using. So for us, we use it for last minute cancellations and when we open the calendar. And this was really helpful because we had a lot of people asking about these things. And so if they're asking, I'm like, great, this is a way for me to like take their email information. They're getting something they want, which is the first heads up at a cancellation or a calendar opening, and we're getting their email address. We only use it to send out calendar openings and last minute cancellations, but some people use it more often. I think it would not be a bad idea to send out a seasonal email with just things that are going on in the area or, updates about the local ski place or hikes or whatever, all of that, because they're obviously interested in your area. So that will be interesting to them. So when it comes to collecting email addresses, I always think about what am I offering them in exchange for their email address? Because anytime you give up your email address, you don't know if you're going to be bombarded with 3 emails a day. Thank you, Bed Bath & Beyond, right? Like you
Yes,
just don't
that's the
know.
worst. That's the worst. And I want to build an email list, but I always try to think about stuff like for me, like I hate it when I sign up for something and then they start sending me I'm almost like, I would have stayed on your email list if you toned it
Yes.
down a little.
Yes. I'm so with
So
you.
I don't want it to be crazy, but I just feel like it's definitely a lost opportunity to not gather the emails and then use them. And I got a big chunk of emails. We were featured in the Parade of Homes. And so I did a giveaway, and I have like 400, I think it's at
Okay,
least
that's a
400
great.
emails. But like I have them in a spreadsheet, and I'm like, aside from just BCCing all of those email addresses in my regular
Okay,
Gmail
you just need a
account,
platform.
yeah, I
Yes.
just don't know how to do that
Yep.
at
I'll
all.
tell you the platform again. There's a bunch of different platforms you can use. The one that we use is MailerLite because it's free under a certain amount of subscribers. So we now pay for it because I think the number is 1,000 subscribers. But even past that, it's like $10 or $15 a month, right? Which feels
Okay.
worth it to me. We don't spend a lot on marketing. And so we use MailerLite for a couple reasons. It's really simple and easy to use. You can then save old emails and build templates out of them. So honestly, when I go in, if I'm opening a new calendar, I just pull up the template from last season's and then edit it and like add a new picture, update the dates for events. So every time we send out a seasonal one, we put in like big events happening in the area, we put in pictures of the area, and then we link to the tourism bureau so they can get an idea of what's happening. The
Nice.
other reason we use MailerLite is because you can integrate it with a like survey tool. So at one of our cabins, how we collect email addresses is, and this is in Boone, and the reason, so this is the one different way we used to collect them. In Boone, we can sleep 8 to 10 people. So usually the person booking is only one person in the group. So our goal was, how do we capture all 8 of those people? Because all 8 of
Right.
those people are guests, but the only person I've been in contact with is the one booking. So we, in our very first email that goes out to them, we ask that all guests in their group register before the stay. And there's a link to a form. We use Typeform is the tool that we use. I also think that's free if you're only using, I don't remember if we pay for it, but it's not a lot. And when they go to register, they put in their first name, their last name, their email address. And then I ask like 3 questions about their stay. Are you traveling with a group of friends? Are you traveling with family? Will there be any kids? Do you have any dogs? And all of that links to an automated email system where then they get emails from me, not Airbnb messages, because the only person getting my automated Airbnb messages is the person who booked.
Right.
Everyone in the group now gets emails with the address, with the amenities. And one of the emails is a custom curated itinerary based on the answers to their question. So if you're coming with a group of friends, I've given you exactly what me and my group of friends does from Friday through Sunday. Here's where we eat. Here's where we go hiking. Here's what we do. And so the incentive for them to sign up for this is, one, if you're in the group, you also get all the details. So you're not relying on this one person. If I'm the group organizer, I want everyone to register because I don't want to have to worry about sending you all the
Right.
info either. And then
Yeah.
thirdly, right. And thirdly, as a guest, I now get all of this insight about the area so that I can get excited for the stay. And I always say this in the email that I think travel is 3 parts. It's the anticipation and planning and the excitement. Then it's the actual trip. And then it's the reminiscing and the nostalgia on the back end, right? And so these emails are meant to really help with that first part, the anticipation and the planning. How can I take more of this off your plate? And so that's how I've aimed to collect emails from that cabin. And that was the incentive. For Cozy Rock, the incentive was, if you want to find out about an open calendar or last minute cancellation, sign up. We do not require anyone to register because it's groups of like 2 to 4. It's just
Mhm.
less of a need for that. And so we collect email addresses that way for Cozy Rock. A third way that we don't use, but we have heard of people using, is requiring an email sign in to access your Wi-Fi. I don't have a tool recommendation for this because I haven't done it, but I'm sure if you Google like Wi-Fi login with email, you'll probably find one that you can set up at your cabin. So anyone who wants to log on to Wi-Fi has to submit their email address. I actually think this is a really good one. I should be using this in Boone because, again, you have 8 people there. If one of them wants to book a different trip with their family, you don't know how to get in touch with them. This
Right.
allows you to get in touch with all of them. So I
Yeah.
love that idea. It's on my to-do list and I just haven't done it yet. And then the
Yeah.
fourth way you've already done, which is like a giveaway or some sort of incentive. There is a win for them, right? Like if they give you their email address, they might win a free stay. So that's like a fourth way I've heard of to get emails.
Yeah. Love that.
Okay. You had asked other questions about marketing. So an email list is one way to market. Once you have all those emails, though, is figuring out what to do with them. And I think if you don't open your calendar seasonally, we do. So that's how we use the email list for Cozy Rock. For Boone, we don't do that. And I am totally guilty of not using my email list, and I absolutely should. I would recommend, if you don't open your calendar seasonally, send out one email every season, just highlighting open dates you have left in that season, events that are going on, any discounts, any specials, anything like that. Just put it in an email. Once a season, I feel like there's no way someone would unsubscribe unless they just knew they didn't want to stay there anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But other people, I'm certain, use email lists. That's like a whole path you can go down. If you love writing, that could be something you send out even weekly to just remind people if you don't like social media. I use social media for that. So I don't feel the need to do that. But some people, if that's what you love doing, you love writing, then cool, zone in there. That can help to fill the weekdays. If you have some last minute weekdays open, use the email list, offer a discount, because posting on social media is like, you've sort of narrowed it down that they're interested, but an email list is even more narrowed down. So you're getting a really attentive audience, which will help fill those weekdays.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do like using social media. I'm pretty savvy on Instagram. I've had some good success with some of my reels. I'm just kind of figuring reels out. But it's that same thing, like finding the person who it's going to actually convert to a stay. A lot of people like to just follow beautiful places, but maybe aren't necessarily ever going to book a stay. So just that, trying to figure, and then, I got super, over this last year, I just kind of got like super private with my own life. And I didn't really post a lot on Instagram. I think I posted twice on my personal page in the entire year. And so now jumping back onto social media, because I'm promoting a business, it's kind of that internal shift for me of like that privacy, and now everything's out there. You said something on a podcast. I don't remember how far back it was. I wrote it down because I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel that. Let me see if I have it. It was something about how vulnerable it is to own a business. And so I feel that a little bit too. So it's like in my brain, I know I need to show up on social media and I need to post, and the algorithm and trending audios and like all of those tips and tricks to make that content perform. But I'm kind of in that stage where I'm just like, oh, you're like putting your whole like heart out there, and it's super vulnerable, and trying to like steel myself for the grouchy people I know will eventually come.
I know.
So there's that piece.
I know. It's so funny. I give advice to people because we do social media jump starts at my business. And I often hear from our clients as they start to grow, like, I got my first troll. And my response is always, congratulations, you're reaching new people. If everyone's being nice, you're only reaching your friends usually, right?
Right.
And so when you start finding those trolls, what that indicates is you're finding new people. And if one of them's a dick, but then there's like 50 other ones who actually are like, I love this cabin, that's a win. Now, I obviously struggle with that.
I think that's human nature, right? Like, especially when you're just like a kind and happy person, and that's what you put out into the world. When you receive back the opposite of that, I think it's hard to understand why people, are that way. But yeah, I love, I'm trying to figure out that balance between, again, like, you have to use this trending audio, and you have to put a hook here, and you have to put a hook here, and then that takes out some of the fun and the creativity in it, when you feel like you have to do it this certain way, and then it doesn't always feel like super authentic. So I'm just trying to find that balance in just being like, yeah, I want to do what's going to get my content out there, but at the same time, I want it to, it's a reflection of me,
Totally.
So, yeah.
I think there's two things there. The first one I would say is that I really strongly believe that for a social media account to be an effective marketing tool for an Airbnb, you do not need 50 to 100,000 followers. You need the right followers. And the tricky part of
Exactly.
that is that sometimes trending audio and things like that will reach someone in New Jersey because that's how the algorithm works. And that person might think your cabin is beautiful, but they're probably not going to come to Montana to stay at it, right? So instead, they're
Mhm.
going to ask you about paint colors and cabin layout and like all these things, which is not necessarily a bad thing because we've also hosted the people who have asked those questions. They've then come to stay. But I always say it's not necessarily about quantity, it's about finding the right people. And I do think that figuring out your approach to social media and your cabin and what makes you different is going to be the most important thing that you do versus just following the trends and doing all those things. They can help. If you know who you are and the kind of content you want to put out, then yes, picking the right trending audio to go with that reel could be a huge boost you wouldn't otherwise have. But I don't think it's the most important part. I think that strategy is. So I always think about when I think about social media posts, I always think about basically a sales funnel, right? And the phases of the sales funnel are know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer, right? Like that's like getting deeper and deeper down that funnel. So the whole point of trending audio is that you need people to know you. So by
Mhm.
using the algorithm to your advantage, you will find more people who don't know about you yet. But that's only a small portion of the work because once they know about you and they start to follow, the next step is getting them to like and trust you so that they then will try your experience. And so try and buy in a rental is like a tricky one, right? Because buying is basically trying it. Though I do think there's a slight difference. We opened up one night stays on Cozy Rock, which we had never done before because we wanted to give people a lower entry point. If you have an
Yeah.
expensive price point and every one of our stays was 2 to 3 night minimum, that's $1,000. It's really hard to like try it. Although I do
Right.
think of like cabin tours as a form of try. But one night stays were a great way to get people in the door. And even if they didn't then buy and come back for a longer stay, if they really enjoyed it, they might refer us to other people. And if they have family in town, they might send that their way, right? So when thinking about your posts and the different tools on Instagram, like the stories, the highlights, the posts, the reels, which ones are you using for what? And I would say reels are really, really good at high end funnel. They're good at finding you new people in a way that posts can, but don't always because the algorithm likes reels better. So that's why I recommend reels for that very high end finding new people. But the rest of the work is what are you doing once you have them? And that's where I hear your hesitation about how much do I want to share for them to then like me, trust me, and want to try this.
Mhm.
The beautiful part about a cabin, though, is you don't necessarily have to share your whole human self. You can. And I do think there's advantages to doing that,
I do agree. Yeah.
but you can share your whole hosting self. You put so much intentionality. You built that cabin. So every decision you had to wrestle in your mind, what kind of floors am I using and why? There's content, right? That's explaining to people why I picked this feature in the cabin. It tells them about the experience and tells them about you as a host. And
Yeah.
so I always think like stories are great because they disappear in 24 hours. But if you
Yeah.
get a great response to it, you can save it in a highlight so it
Mhm.
can live longer. But I think that's a great place to practice that vulnerability of just getting to know people. And
Yeah.
then when they DM you, that energy is like kind of synergetic. You want to post more because you're hearing from people and you're building that relationship, which is the like and the trust.
Yeah.
And then thinking about, okay, so they know me, they like me, they trust me. Now I want to get them to buy. A certain percentage of your posts should be focused on conversion. Okay, great. You've been following me for a while. What's stopping you from booking a stay? So maybe it's discounts on a last minute stay. Maybe it's a giveaway. That's a good try too, where someone can try it without having to buy and can potentially get you more followers. So it helps more people enter the funnel from the top, right? So it's actually serving kind of two purposes if you do the right giveaway. But I always think that's really helpful, I think, in approaching any of your strategy, but especially social media is like, what are the goals of each of these? And if the trending audio or, whatever can help you find more people, great. But ultimately, what is that post trying to do? Which part of the funnel is it working to serve?
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of had that, I was like, okay, I've had a couple reels that did really well. They're at like 23,000 views, and that's great. But everything happening on Instagram is awesome. But every single booking I've had came from Airbnb directly. So like I'm
Interesting.
asking people when they book one of my first I I'm like, thank you so much for choosing the AFrame. And I ask, how did you hear about us? Because I want to try to figure out every single one. I was searching for amenities
So
on
smart.
Airbnb. So then I had that realization, like, the social media part is good, and it's a needed piece of my marketing, and eventually I think that it will bring me the right customers, but Airbnb is what is bringing me customers right now. It's people from, like, I can't believe the people that are booking, they're from all over.
Yeah. And
Um
they're finding you on Airbnb. Okay.
yeah,
So then that I think gives you really valuable information that maybe the only part of the funnel you need to worry about is repeat and refer. Because
yes.
sometimes social media can be a way to find guests who've never stayed there, but it can also be a way to stay top of mind for guests who have already come. And so we have little framed things in Boone that say, like, follow us on Instagram at Cozy Cabin Boone, tag us, hashtag Cozy Cabin Boone. So a lot of our followers there, because I spend no time posting, don't come from randoms. They come from people who have stayed at the cabin. So then posting on that account, I always think of my audience not as people who haven't stayed here, but people who have stayed here.
Yeah.
My job is to remind them what they enjoyed and encourage them to book another trip to the mountains. So then sharing what's going on in the mountains in your stories, always reminding them of events coming up, offering discounts for repeat guests might be really smart to get them to then repeat and refer. Even offering referral bonuses. If they refer you to someone else, you'll give them a $100 referral bonus or whatever, and figure out a way to do that. We haven't done that before, but I've thought about it and I love the idea. So just knowing, okay, that's really good. Your Instagram is serving your current guests and encouraging them to come back. Even putting things in highlights of, like, how to use the house or places to eat so that their stay is better, adding a guidebook, things like that.
So this is where then one of the things on my list is direct bookings. Like, is that something that I need to invest time in? I've had several people reach out that wanted to go around Airbnb to book with me, and I just am not set up and prepared to do that yet. Yeah. But then I'm like, if, like you said, okay, you're going to offer a discount to a repeat guest, I don't know how to do that in Airbnb. How does that work?
We are not the best person for that. And we are right at our hour time, unfortunately. And I am meeting someone for a run right at noon. But what I will say, I'll leave you. I think that's an amazing question. I am not the expert on direct bookings because we have not done that ourselves yet. Gotcha. We are offering discounts via our email list to repeat guests, but I'm doing all of that manually. Literally the first one, I like Venmo'd them the difference because I couldn't figure out how to do it on Airbnb.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I just, like, it was a repeat guest, so it was someone I already had a relationship with, and it was easy to be like, I'm just going to Venmo you, because I tried to figure it out and I couldn't. But that is a common topic on the podcast, and if you haven't listened to Candace's part 1 and part 2,
I loved it.
Okay. She is a huge proponent of direct booking. We also did one with Jared Johnson, direct vacation bookings. And that one is 100% about direct bookings. And he talks about a lot of the technical aspect of it. So that would be another podcast episode I would recommend to look into for direct bookings.
Awesome. Yeah, I've listened to, if it's an AFrame podcast, I've listened to it. And a lot of those girls have been super kind to message with me in Instagram as well when I've had questions. So yeah, it's a good community.
Yeah, it really is. This was so great. It was really great to meet you. Thank you for doing this on a podcast instead of privately, just the two of us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity. It was awesome. I hope down the road I can come back and as a guest on your podcast with, like, amazing things to share. That's my hope anyway in a year.
I'm sure you will. I love that. We'll keep in touch for sure. It was really good to meet you.
You too. Thanks so much, Janice.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. This makes a big difference for us. A lot of you have found us via Instagram, but we're also hoping to find folks who've never met us on Instagram, but are still passionate about cabin culture and the cabin way of life. When you leave reviews there, it makes it more likely that they can find us. So thank you if you've already done this. And if you haven't, that would be the very best Christmas gift you could give me. Thank you. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.